The Reaper's Touch. The first time I saw it, I thought it was nothing more than a shadow. A trick of the mind, perhaps, brought on by the sickness that plagued our village. The Black Death had taken so many from us. My father, my brother, my neighbors, one by one. It had been a relentless curse that spread through the streets like wildfire. And soon, it was our turn. My mother, my sister, and I lay in the small cabin we had once shared as a family, now reduced to a stifling silence filled with only the sound of our feverish breathing. I don't remember the precise moment I first noticed the figure that stood at the edge of the village. It was there, though, always at the edge of my vision, a dark shape cloaked in tattered black robes. I could never make out its face, but there was a chilling presence that wrapped around it like smoke. No one else seemed to see it, but I knew it was there. I saw it every time I glanced out the window, standing at the farthest edge of the trees where the shadows grew long. It was waiting for something. The sickness had taken its toll on all of us. My mother's skin was pale, her eyes vacant, and my sister had grown delirious, babbling in her sleep. And me? I wasn't far behind. The sweat on my brow burned like fire, and my chest rattled with every cough. I feared I was on the brink of death, just like the others. Yet, there was something deeper within me, a sense of dread that had little to do with the disease, but rather with the figure I couldn't escape. I tried to ignore it at first. After all, who had time for shadows when your family was dying before your eyes? But the more I watched it, the more I felt its gaze. It was as if it could see right into me, watching, waiting for something. That night, after the rest of the house had fallen silent, I heard the scraping of claws on the wooden floor outside our door. I tried to rise from my bed to investigate, but my body trembled with weakness, my legs barely holding me upright. I stumbled toward the door, leaning against the wall, desperate to see who or what was causing the noise. And then I saw it. It wasn't a person. It wasn't human at all. The figure that stood outside our door was tall, its body a swirling mass of shadows that shifted like smoke. Its face, if it could be called a face, was nothing but a hollow skull with empty eyes, dark as the night itself. The creature's form seemed to writhe, as though it were made of the very darkness that had swallowed the world. Its hands were skeletal, long fingers that twitched and curled, as if it were anticipating something. I froze, my heart thundering in my chest. There was no mistaking it now. This was no mere shadow, no trick of the mind. This was something far worse. The creature stepped closer, and the air around me grew cold. I could feel its presence pushing into my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but no words would come. My legs were rooted to the floor, my body betraying me. My mother's faint, rasping breaths from the next room were the only sound in the house. But then, something in my mind snapped. I couldn't just stand here and wait to die. I had to do something, anything. My hand groped for the iron poker by the hearth, and I gripped it tight, holding it like a weapon. I stood tall, despite the weakness in my legs, and pointed the poker at the creature. "You stay away," I choked out, my voice ragged. "You're not taking anyone else, not my family, not my mother or my sister. Do you hear me? Stay away." The creature didn't respond. It simply stood there, watching me with its empty eyes. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt a wave of nausea rise in my stomach. Still, I refused to back down. I gripped the poker tighter, my knuckles white. "I'll fight you," I said, though I wasn't sure if I even believed it myself. "I won't let you take them." But as I stepped forward, the creature moved with a suddenness that left me gasping. It reached out, not with hands, but with shadows that seemed to envelop the room. The temperature dropped, and I could hear the sound of my own teeth chattering in fear. I swung the poker at the figure, but it passed right through, as if it wasn't even there. And then, I felt it, the grip of something cold, like fingers made of ice, closing around my heart. I fell to my knees, gasping for breath, the poker slipping from my hand as I clutched my chest. The darkness surrounded me, smothering me, and I feared that it was over. But just as suddenly as it had begun, the cold receded. The shadows seemed to pull back, dissipating like mist at dawn. The pressure on my chest lifted, and I dared to look up. Standing before me was the figure, its skeletal face still obscured by shadows. But now there was a presence, a weight to it that filled the room. The creature wasn't just a monster, it was something far worse, something I had no words for. "Do not fear me," it said, its voice like the wind howling through a graveyard. "I am not your enemy." I wanted to scream, to run, but my body was paralyzed with terror. I couldn't move. "What do you want?" I whispered, my throat dry. "I do not want to take. I do not want to steal. I am here to offer release." The creature answered, its voice deep and resonating with a quiet power. "Your family suffers. You suffer, and I can end it." I shook my head, confusion and fear making my thoughts muddled. I don't understand. You want to take them? Take them from me? The creature's form seemed to soften for a moment, as if it were trying to show some kind of empathy, though I saw no emotion on its face. No, it replied softly. I do not take. I guide. I ease their suffering. It is time for them to rest, time for them to be free. I looked toward the room where my mother and sister lay. They were sick. They were dying, but were they ready to go? Were they ready to leave me behind? But as I gazed at their still forms, I realized something. I wasn't ready to let go of them, but they had already let go of the pain. The disease was the only thing keeping them tethered to this world. I had seen it in their eyes. There was nothing left here for them. They were waiting for release. I can help them, the creature said, but you must let go of the fear. It is the only way. My chest tightened. My mother, her eyes clouded with fever. My sister, trembling with delirium. They were trapped, and I had been too blinded by my own fear to see it. The creature was not here to harm them. It was here to give them peace. With a trembling breath, I nodded. Take them, I whispered. Take them now. The creature stepped forward, reaching out a long skeletal hand toward the door. A soft light flickered from the darkness as the room seemed to shift, as if the world itself was bending to the creature's will. And then, the cold hands of death, once so terrifying, enveloped my family, easing their pain in an instant. My mother's face softened, the tension in her brow fading. My sister's shivering stopped, and her features smoothed into serenity. The creature turned to me, its empty eyes gazing into mine. You are not alone, it said, its voice now warm, like a whisper in the wind. I will guide you when your time comes. Until then, you must live. But remember, it is not the end that is to be feared, but the suffering that comes before it. And with that, it took my family's souls. I watched as they faded into the light, their forms dissolving into the warmth of eternal peace. The world around me seemed to fall away, the weight of my fear lifting from my chest. The night was still. The sickness was no longer a threat. The Reaper was gone, leaving me with nothing but the silence of the afterlife and the lingering warmth of the souls it had taken. For the first time in what felt like years, I could breathe. The next day, when the sickness had finally taken me as well, I did not fear the darkness. I welcomed it, for I knew in that moment that the Reaper was not my enemy. It had come to save us all, to bring us peace when we could no longer find it on our own. And when my time came, it would be there again, to guide me into the next world, where suffering no longer existed. For now, I rest in peace, knowing my family is free from pain. The Reaper did not come to steal us away, but to guide us into the light, into eternal peace. And in the end, that is what we all seek, peace. The old man in the cemetery. Michael, do you think people come back as ghosts after they die? Gavin was always asking weird questions like that. If he hadn't been my best friend since second grade, I probably would have ignored him. But since it was Halloween night, and I didn't want him to think I was scared of his stupid question, I answered with as much false bravado as I could muster. Of course not, I told him as we walked down the neighborhood sidewalk. Ghosts aren't real. Do you think loved ones become ghosts together? Do you mean like people who have been married a long time, or relatives? What if friends die together? Does that mean they stay friends forever? I let out a sarcastic grunt. You ask the weirdest questions, man. You're just trying to scare me. Gavin shrugged, then tried to give me a wet willy. I dodged him easily, then flipped him off. We laughed all the way to the next street. We'd both turned 12 that school year and came to the mutual conclusion that trick-or-treating was for little kids. Candy was cool, yeah, but visiting house after house in the hopes to get something premium was something we'd done year after year, and the thought of doing the same routine all over again made our eyes glaze over. We decided that night that we wanted to do something different, something more mature and exciting, something scarier. A brilliant moon cast our environment in a silver glow. The nighttime temperature was low, and I was glad I decided to wear my hoodie. Porch lights from neighborhood houses splashed yellow light on my shadow. A few bats flitted around the power lines above our heads. Gavin was never one to shy away from regaling me with stories he'd heard from his older brother and his brother's friends. Stories of axe murderers, serial killers with hooks for hands, flying monsters that could snatch up school children and take them back to a hidden lair. As we left the crowded streets of trick-or-treaters, Gavin told me ghost stories to set the mood for our creepy night out. I would be lying if I said the tales didn't get under my skin, but I could never tell my best friend that. I'd never hear the end of it. That's how we ended up huddled together at the wrought iron entrance gate of Jasmine Gardens. Our local cemetery was massive compared to our town's small population, but it was also one of the oldest in the state. It was the ideal spot to see how brave we really were. It's where all the high schoolers hang out. They say this place is haunted, Gavin told me as he pointed through the metal bars into the obscure cemetery. Come on, Michael. Are you chicken shit? No, don't call me that. Prove it. Open the gate and let's go in. I took a deep breath and forced down my apprehension. Then I pushed the heavy doors. They opened with a creak and we slipped inside. A heavy fog had settled over Jasmine Gardens. Gravestones were faint objects against the murky gray of ancient oaks draped in hanging moss. A thin layer of dew blanketed the grass. I stepped off the concrete pathway as a thick cloud wandered over the full moon, limiting our visibility even further. No houses were in sight. No cars drove down the road. It was just me, Gavin, and the cemetery. Come on, Gavin said. My brother said all the cool kids hang out by the rocks. What if we get lost? You aren't scared, are you? No. My false bravado was back. I prayed he didn't see me shivering. We made our way through aisles of the dead, lives that were lived before they were stuck in the ground like grotesque plants with souls. Withered wreaths rested lazily along some of the deceased. Marble benches were scattered intermittently for those wanting to rest among the resting. The fog had become so opaque that I had to get close to the headstones to see the names. Betty Addison, 1902 to 1968. Beloved mother and grandmother Joshua Williams, 1956 to 2004, until we meet again. Franklin, Frankie Jackson, 1933 to 2016, remembered with love. An eerie feeling washed over me. Do you think people come back as ghosts after they die? Gavin had asked. My mind raced with the possibility that all the people buried here could somehow see me. They could hear my heartbeat increase in pace. They could smell my fear. Several of the headstones had pairs of inscriptions, spouses buried side by side, children buried next to their parents. Gavin had asked, do you think loved ones become ghosts together? The question rattled in my brain. What if it were true? Are you bound to someone in spirit when your body lays next to them forever? Then there was the more disturbing question. Can ghosts persuade the living to join them? To squash my fear, I started to walk faster. Over here, Gavin said after we rounded one of the large oaks. It's this way. A large outcrop lay in the middle of the cemetery. I could see it through the gnarled branches of the tree. The craggy rocks rose higher and higher until the peak vanished into the high-rising fog. A cool breeze came through and sent the leafless branches of the oak into a macabre dance. The branches crudely chimed against one another, playing a tune that the residents of Jasmine Gardens would hear until the tree itself died. Then came a sharp snap. A branch falling? Someone tripping over the concrete path? A reanimated body wrestling out of its grave and toppling its headstone? My lungs pinched shut. My feet grew into cinder blocks. Every hair on my neck stood on end. I turned around and squinted into the distance. What was that? I whispered. Gavin didn't seem too worried. Probably a bird. At night? Who cares? Let's go to the rocks. I'm freaking out. Let's go to my house. We can watch a horror movie. I'll let you pick. In typical Gavin fashion, he rolled his eyes and grumbled. Don't chicken out on me now, Michael. The rocks are right there. If the older kids go to it, then it must be cool. I don't know. Please? He asked with more sincerity than normal. You wanted to do something more mature, right? Something exciting? Gavin was my best friend. He was the first classmate who spoke to me when I moved into town, and soon we'd become so close we had our own swear handshake. It was like a promise, a physical gesture that proved to the other we were serious. It was something we shared, just the two of us. He'd always been a great friend. Over the years, he taught me how to shoot a basketball and how to ride a bike. Summers were full of pool parties, camping trips, even if they were in his backyard, and lazy Saturdays spent playing video games and watching funny clips on YouTube and TikTok. He was the reason my childhood was so fun. Gavin was also the one who comforted me when my mom got sick and spent a month in the hospital. His shoulder was the one I cried on. His words of encouragement were the ones I leaned on when depression set in. Was I really going to let my best friend down now? Okay, I'll go. Swear? We grappled our pinkies together, then crooked our thumbs together, and finally fist bumped. Swear, I told him. He hopped in excitement. Awesome! We can climb to the top. The other side isn't as steep as this one. I know that some kids jump from the top and land in a big pile of mulch on the other side. Follow me. Jumping? Into a pile of mulch? It sounded dangerous, thrilling, fun. Exactly the kind of thing we wanted to get into on Halloween night. A beaten path met the first outcropping of rocks, and we followed it until we were both about 10 feet above ground level. Even from this height, the headstones were blurred by the darkness and fog. The air had become significantly chillier since Gavin and I had made our way out of the rowdy mob of trick-or-treaters, and clouds still covered the moon. In the gloom, I did my best to maneuver around the sharp edges of the exposed rock. I lifted my foot to step up on a boulder when a twig snapped below us. This noise was very close. "What is that?" I whispered. "I don't know. Maybe we should keep going up." Then I saw it. A figure in the darkness, moving toward us, fast. "Gavin, look!" The figure managed around headstones like it had been living in the cemetery for decades. It held something in its hands. A stick? No, something else. A knife? "Let's get the hell out of here." Gavin was in awe. "Is that a ghost?" "Let's not wait around to find out." The figure was running toward the base of the outcrop, so our only option was up. Through the dimness, we struggled around exposed rocks and sharp edges. My shoes pounded against the hard surface. My lungs stung from exertion. My cheeks were cold with tears. Fear consumed me like a living, breathing being, while the unliving, breathless being chased us toward the peak. The top of the outcrop was a flat platform of rock covered in thin patches of moss. All around us was a sea of fog. No lights could be seen from our vantage point. No monuments of any kind to orient ourselves. We were alone, maybe 35 or 40 feet above the cemetery ground, stuck on top of an outcrop while a ghost was rushing toward us. I was sobbing now. Terror had set it. This place really was haunted. I begged my best friend for an answer. "What do we do? What do we do?" Gavin looked around nonchalantly, then stepped toward the edge of the rock. In front of him was a wall of murky nothingness. "No," I countered. "We can't see what's down there." "A big pile of mulch is down there, Michael. What other option is there? The ghost is coming." I could hear the strain in his voice. He was as nervous as I was. "What if I miss?" "You won't." I braved a glance down the drop-off and my body tensed. I then looked back at the path, knowing the killer ghost was near. Gavin clapped to get my attention. "Stay with me, Michael," Gavin said in a serious tone. "You can do it." "A soft landing is there? Do you swear?" He stuck his hand out. We grappled our pinkies together, then crooked our thumbs together and finally fist bumped. "Swear," he said. The toes of my shoes jutted over the rocky edge. My heart hammered wildly in my chest. My ears rang with a peal of panic. Every fiber of my being told me to halt, to wait, to not do it. But what choice did I have? Gavin was my best friend. He'd been there for me through so many terrible times in my life. Was I going to stop trusting him now? I held my arms out for balance, coiled my legs, and steadied myself to jump. "Wait, kid." A blinding yellow light washed over me. The ghost was here, on the peak of the outcrop. Its ethereal light shone on me like it was trying to put me in a trance. It was going to capture me, lure me to the depths of hell. I took a step back and felt the ground under my shoe slip. "Stop, kid. What the hell is wrong with you?" The ghost had something in its hand, but it wasn't a knife. It was a flashlight. It pointed the flashlight away from me and toward the ground, sending yellow light in all directions. I saw that it wasn't a ghost at all. It was an old man. Long gray hair matched a scraggly beard. He was in a black coat and pants with heavy boots. An alarmed, puzzled expression covered his face. "Get away from there. Step over here, where it's safe." Even though he was silent with fear, I could feel Gavin next to me, his soft breath on my neck. I wondered what he would do. "Who are you?" I muttered. "I'm the caretaker of Jasmine Gardens." "Why are you here this late?" He scowled. "I should be asking you the same damn question. I come out here every Halloween night to make sure kids like you don't do something stupid. Were you about to jump?" "Yeah, into the mulch." The old man sighed and came next to me. His eyes were full of worry and anger. Then he pointed his flashlight over the rock's edge. The light exposed the spot where the soft mulch was, or where the mulch should have been. "We moved that mulch years ago," the old man said. Instead of a soft place to land, the ground was covered in jagged rocks lifting up from the grass. Had I jumped? Then the man's face changed, and his cheeks lifted into his eyes. "Hey, you're Jeremy Stevenson's boy, aren't you?" "Yes, sir. That's my dad." "I've known him since he was about your age. Michael is your name, right?" After I nodded, the old man's head lowered, and his shoulders hunched inward. "Yeah, I think I understand why you came out here." "You do?" I asked. "Yeah, a cemetery is a common place to reflect, but you'll get over it." "Get over what?" The man came closer and bent on one knee. "I heard about the car accident. I knew you two were close. Gavin was his name." "Gavin? No, he's right here." But my best friend was not beside me. Only the fog and darkness were beside me. "It's tough losing a friend, kid. Just know he's in a better place." "That's not true. That's not true." "It's true. It happened this afternoon. The news is all over town. I'm so sorry, kid." My head swiveled around in my search for Gavin in search of my best friend. He was gone. Then the realization struck me like a whip. I understood why he'd wanted to come to Jasmine Gardens and scale the outcrop. There had been no mulch, and he knew it. Only hard, sharp rocks that would have cracked my skull open. Had I jumped, I would have died. What if friends die together? The ghost of Gavin had asked me. Does that mean they stay friends? Forever? Can ghosts persuade the living to join them? Yes, they can, I swear. Well, that was pretty much it. I hope you liked the story till then. Bye-bye.